So, it's wonderful to welcome everybody here today. This is a special day for me. It's my birthday, or actually it's the day after my actual birthday, but if you know astronomy, then you'll know that the cosmic birthday, when the sun returns to where it was at your birth, is, as you get older, one day later, generally speaking. So today is my cosmic birthday, and it's wonderful to celebrate this together with friends, and also to follow up on this invitation to relate something from my biography. I had an idyllic childhood growing up outside the town of Reading, which is about 1 hour west of London in England. And I didn't know it at the time when I was growing up there, but living in the town of Reading was a person who I later came to study as one of my spiritual teachers, a Russian immigrant who was living there, Valentin Tomberg, who I have the greatest respect and admiration for. And so growing up, I excelled in science and above all in mathematics. So I went on to study mathematics at university, and then I became a teacher of mathematics at what is now called Brighton University. Brighton is a large town south of London on the south coast, really a tourist town. It was a very nice place to study, and I studied at Sussex University, which is very nearby. And after graduating from Sussex University, I took on a post as lecturer at what is now Brighton University. At that time it was called Brighton Polytechnic. And I was teaching mathematics to students of computer science. And this was a very interesting time in my life. At the same time, I was working on my PhD on the history of the zodiac. That has been a special theme in my life. And so I also was studying in the library of the British Museum in London, which has an incredible collection of books, and I was registered, following up on PhD with a professor at the Warburg Institute in London, which is an institute for cultural studies, which also has an incredible library. So during that time I got to know many different approaches to the themes I was interested in. And one day when I came out from the British Museum library, my lunch break, and I was walking down the street called Museum Street opposite the library, and I saw this bookstore which looked very interesting, and it was a Rudolf Steiner bookstore. So I went in there and I had many questions which it seemed to me were being answered in some of these books. So there was also a library there, and I was able to borrow books, and I was invited to a study group to study the deeper significance of our relationship to the stars. And I found in the works of Rudolf Steiner incredible indications which help one to understand how and why we are connected with the starry heavens. This is something that astrologers are not really able to explain. They just say, well, we know it works. And as a scientist, I wasn't really satisfied with that. I wanted to know why. And so through studying the works of Rudolf Steiner, I came into a deeper understanding of how there is an interconnection between the stars and the earth, the whole of nature, and for every human being, our lives are connected with the stars. And there are certain rhythms in human life which we can follow, which are related to the stars. So I was studying all of this, and at the same time, through my study of the history of the zodiac, which was like a kind of archaeological investigation, my goal was to find out about the first scientific definition of the zodiac. And this took me back to around about 500 years before Christ, to the Babylonians, and there you find the first scientific definition, which is related to the actual starry heavens. And modern day astrologers have by and large forgotten this, because it's just to keep it very brief, what is a complex history, that Greek astronomers knew about the zodiac as well, but they didn't know how the zodiac was defined, and they came up with a new definition which was fine at that time. They said that the sign of Aries begins with the vernal equinox, the vernal point, which marks where the sun is on the day of the vernal equinox. And this was true at the time of Claudius Ptolemy, who was the most influential Greek astronomer. And so this is what has come into the West. But interestingly, so when we look at how the zodiac and knowledge of the stars spread from Babylon, the Babylonians were tremendous stargazers, and they observed everything very exactly, and they were the first to develop the rudiments of astronomy and being able to calculate where the planets will be in the future. And the very definition of the word planet, planet of course is a Greek word, means moving star, goes back to the Babylonians, who were systematically observed that certain stars move against the background of the other stars. So the other stars, which is the vast majority of stars, are called the fixed stars, and the moving stars we call the planets. And the Babylonians then wanted to be able to specify how one could determine when a planet returns to the same location against the background of the fixed stars. And so eventually they came around 500 years before Christ to define the zodiac in relation to certain prominent stars. And this, at that time, it was the only definition of the zodiac. It was just called the zodiac. In antiquity, there was no need for any other name. But when the Greek astronomer Ptolemy, when through him a new definition of the zodiac came about, then it was necessary to call the original zodiac by a name to distinguish it from this new zodiac that was introduced in Greek times. And so the Babylonian zodiac is referred to as the Sidereal zodiac. Sidereal means related to the stars. And the zodiac, which came into existence through Greek astronomers, is called the tropical zodiac and is related to the cycle of the seasons. We have the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and the vernal equinox, the autumnal equinox, and that is how this new zodiac is defined. Now, what is clear if you carefully read Ptolemy's work is that he was fully aware that this tropical zodiac moves in relation to the sidereal zodiac. And in the meantime, so at that time when he was writing, they coincided more or less. They were just a 1 degree difference. But now there is a 25 degree difference, so it makes a huge difference. When a modern astrologer who's working with this Greek system says, that he's born with the sun in Aries, then because of the shift, that generally speaking you'll find the sun is actually in Pisces. So as it happens today, the sun is in the first 5 degrees of the sidereal sign of Capricorn, which means it's in the last part of the tropical sign of Capricorn. So regardless of which system you refer to, both it's valid to say the sun today, without getting into any trouble, the sun is in Capricorn. I say without getting into any trouble because having written my PhD thesis on the history of the zodiac and knowing a lot, I won't say everything, but knowing a lot about the zodiac and its history, I have been invited many times to speak at astrological gatherings, and most astrologers find this very upsetting. And I understand why, because if they're working professionally, earning money, and they've been telling somebody for 10 years that they're born in the sign of Aries, and then they would have to admit, no, actually, you were born in the sign of Pisces, and what I've been telling you all these years isn't quite accurate, You can imagine what kind of courage that takes, and there are very few astrologers who have that kind of courage. But interestingly, so when Alexander the Great conquered Babylon, then the knowledge of the Babylonians spread to Egypt and to Greece and to Rome. And in Egypt, the city that Alexander the Great founded, Alexandria, became really the hub, a sort of melting pot for astrology, astrological ideas, and from there, then astrology spread actually all the way to India. Now, in India, there was already from very ancient times, ancient Sanskrit literature, we find reference to a division of the starry heavens. So we could say a division of the sidereal realm into 28 nakshatras. Now, when the zodiac became transmitted from Alexandria to India, and we know about this from a book called the Yavana Jataka of Spujit Vaja, and in that book there is we find the documentation, the transmission of the zodiac to India. The zodiac, of course, divides the starry heavens into 12 signs. and in the ancient Vedic system, they had 28-fold division of the starry heavens. But when the zodiac came, they changed this to 27 nakshatras. One nakshatra, Abhijit, was dropped, was left out. And so now in the modern Indian astrology, you find only 27 nakshatras. This is different from the ancient Sanskrit tradition. And so I've gone into all of these things in my PhD thesis. Now, when the zodiac came to came to Egypt, the Egyptian priests also had their own division of the sidereal heavens, a 36-fold division. Now, for them, it was much easier to fit the 36 into the 12-fold division by simply saying, okay, we have 3 in each sign, 3, and they call them decans or decans, 10 degrees occupying each sign of the sidereal zodiac. So it's very interesting to explore all of this, but that's not going to be the main theme today, but just to give some background that when people speak about their zodiac sign, it's not necessarily what they think it is. And interestingly, nowadays, if you have an iPad or computer, you can have an app, an astronomy app, and with that you can just see where everything is in the starry heavens. An incredible achievement, accomplishment through modern technology. And so you can find and see, for example, where the sun is at the present moment in time. Normally you can't see where the sun is because the sun, which is our local star, is too bright and you don't see the other stars. But so in ancient times, what we have to realize, when, say, for the Babylonians, they said the sun is in Capricorn, they understood that the sun is a star, and it is together with the stars that make up the constellation of Capricorn. And this very basic understanding, the sun is in Capricorn or the sun is in Aries, that it has to do with our sun as a star being together against this background of the other stars. And so this is the confusion in our time, because this scientific concept of the sign of the zodiac is probably the most widespread scientific concept, because you find even little children at the age of 5 will tell you what their zodiacal sign is, but without really knowing what they're saying, And so there's an entire belief system surrounding this, and it was quite interesting for me to explore all of this and to come back to what I mentioned earlier. I found that when I was invited to speak about it, that I was not very popular for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. And so I just give one example. I was invited to speak at an astrology conference in Brussels, Belgium. Was to be the whole conference in French, so I prepared my talk presenting my research in French and presented my talk, and then afterwards this professor of theology a Belgian professor of theology, came up, but he was also a passionate astrologer, and he came onto the stage. I'd left the stage, and he sat down and he said, "So here we have our beautiful astrology, and here comes Powell turning it all upside down." And he was a very powerfully built guy. He said, "Just imagine, a Gemini, I am supposed to be a Taurus." So, anyway, it's amazing actually how a belief system can live in a whole population or in the whole world. But interestingly, in India, they still adhere to pretty much what the Babylonians found as the original zodiac. There's just a very slight difference. The Indian government had an official definition of the zodiac made in the year 1955 because there were discrepancies, different ways of dividing up the sidereal zodiac. And with that official Indian zodiac definition, there's just a 1 degree difference from the Babylonian, the original Babylonian definition. So it's very interesting finding out about these, our relationship to the starry heavens and how that influences us. So for those of you who look up to the starry heavens right now, when it's clear in the morning, say around 5 o'clock in the morning, and if it's not clouded over, then you can see these two incredibly bright stars, Venus and Jupiter, very close to one another, and you'll see above and to the right of Venus and Jupiter, you will see a reddish, bright red star, and that is the star Antares, which marks the heart of the Scorpion. So you can see with your own eyes that Venus and Jupiter are in Scorpio. But as most astrologers, at least in the Western world, will say, they'll say that right now Venus and Jupiter are in Sagittarius, because they don't look at the starry heavens. They just have books in which they refer, and the book tells them that Venus and Jupiter are currently in Sagittarius. So that was one of the reasons for me to begin publishing this yearly journal, Journal for Star Wisdom. I was editor of this for many years, and here we have the in this journal for Star Wisdom. Each month you'll find day by day listed where the planets really are in the Sidereal zodiac. And a friend of mine has now taken over as editor, and the name has been changed. Cosmology Reborn Star Wisdom Volume 1 has just come out for this year, 2019, and there are many wonderful articles in here where the focus of interest is more what I would call the big picture, not am I going to meet a tall dark stranger next week, or the things that tend to occupy astrologers, but more the big picture, what is taking place on planet Earth right now, and to get a sense for this. So this is one of the approaches that one can follow to what we could call a new star wisdom. It is a wisdom, if we use the Greek expression star, astro, and Sophia means wisdom, star wisdom, astrosophy. Astrosophy, we could say, is more all-encompassing. You have actually three levels. You have astronomy, which has to do with the actual physical structure of the universe and the observations, physical observations, but now made, of course, with the help of telescopes and radio telescopes, and we've been able to build up this very comprehensive and complicated picture of our galaxy. That's a spiral galaxy. Astronomy, and then astrology, as the name implies, astrology is related to the word logic, should be logical, but there is a discrepancy, you see, between astronomy and astrology, because all astronomers would agree with me that right now you can see Venus and Jupiter in Scorpio. So astronomy and astrosophy are on the same page in this respect. Whereas the vast majority of astrologers have their own way of looking at things. So without going into so much detail regarding this, I want to come back to the studies with the works of Rudolf Steiner, who also had a scientific background, but he developed an extraordinary level of clairvoyance or spiritual seeing, and he was able then to expand science to what he called spiritual science, to embrace other levels beyond the purely physical level of existence. And what I came to realize through studying his works is that there you have the real truth, if I may say, in the sense that without knowing that there are other levels of existence, one cannot understand the world we live in just from a purely physical level. And that is the problem with science, is that its focus is solely upon the physical level. But for example, science cannot explain very simple things like why do trees and plants grow upwards? This defies gravity. And Steiner points to the existence of life energies that are all around us the whole time, which we don't see normally, but which you can begin to see if you develop clairvoyant ability. And then you can see that plants and trees have this life body surrounding them, and that is, this life body responds to the sun and the cosmos, so that is why things grow upwards. Just very simple things like that, which science is not really able to explain. But Steiner goes into much more complicated expositions, and he was somebody who we could describe as a universal genius who you could ask him any question whatsoever and he could give an answer. So this is obviously an extraordinary thing, and he was able to do it out of his spiritual faculties. And he said this is the way forward for humanity into the future, is that we need to develop these spiritual faculties. And a lot of his work was concerned with how to develop these spiritual faculties. And we can see that there is an interest in this when we think of how, for example, in the Western world, since the founding of the Theosophical Society in 1875, or even before, it began shortly before that, but tremendous interest in the ancient wisdom, for example, of India. And this ancient wisdom resonates with the fact that there are levels within the human being which go beyond the physical level. Just to mention one central teaching from ancient India, that is the teaching about the chakras. Chakras, or sometimes called lotus flowers, are actual organs within the human being, but which are not perceptible to physical vision, but which are a reality. And these are actual organs of clairvoyant perception within us, which we can develop. And you will find in ancient Sanskrit literature reference to this, and also in more recent times. And this knowledge has been transmitted to the Western world and has found widespread interest. Nevertheless, science continues to be the prevailing mainstream paradigm, and on the whole, scientists will not occupy themselves with this kind of knowledge from other dimensions of our existence. They just ignore it. And already at the time of Rudolf Steiner, he was born 1861, died in 1925, he was aware of this tendency in science to exclude anything that goes beyond the physical level. And so he saw the importance, the necessity to develop a spiritual science which would help us to bridge between these different realms. And he was also a very practical person who developed various practical applications of spiritual science in the realm of education, medicine, farming, biodynamic farming, which was predecessor really of what we now know as organic farming, and various other realms as well, where he was able to bring his spiritual perceptions and knowledge to be applied, which is a difference from many, or in fact the majority of spiritual teachers in our time who may have an extraordinary level of consciousness but are not really able to transmit practical knowledge which is useful for our daily life. So this is one extraordinary faculty and manifestation that came in the early part of the 20th century through Rudolf Steiner. And if I could just summarize it in a picture, we could say that humanity is on a path and has come to a parting of the ways. And you could say there's one signpost which says, develop your higher faculties that are within you to come to know about other realms of existence in which our earth is enveloped. And with these other realms, of course, when we look up to the stars and the planets, these are manifestations from these other realms. So there is that option for humanity, that we can begin to develop our spiritual faculties. Or the other option, and this is what is promoted through technology, is that we just stay on this intellectual level, that all knowledge is accessible through the internet, which is like a giant electronic brain surrounding planet Earth. Anything you want to know, just Google it, or and you can find out about it. So that keeps humanity on this intellectual level, which is focused on the physical realm of existence, and unable to comprehend that there are other realms beyond. Now, of course, there are exceptions, and we do find through the internet also wonderful impulses that are transmitted, and so it's not a matter of condemning it, but just saying that how there is a tendency through this gigantic electronic brain to keep us on the brain level. And this is coming forwards more and more strongly now with the development of artificial intelligence, which has taken great strides forward, and where one can have genuine concern as to what will happen to humanity. Human beings are different from machines. Human beings have hearts. Human beings can feel. Human beings have free will. And so these are all very important questions for our time. We have to explore them and come to an understanding. And so this is what this work with astrology is very much concerned with. Now, it just so happened in my own destiny that, as well as working on my PhD on history of the zodiac, I was exploring the work of Rudolf Steiner, and I became interested in something that he developed as a new form of movement. And perhaps the easiest way to understand this is if we think of, from ancient China, Tai Chi and Qigong, forms of movement where the teaching is that one is connecting with life energy, and that different movements connect or activate different streams of life energy. And Rudolf Steiner was aware of all of this in connection with the cosmos, that the life energy that we are embedded in our solar system the sun energy, the moon energy, the energy coming towards us from the different planets, from the signs of the zodiac, and so on. And he saw how important this all is for us, and that even language has developed out of the heavens. He describes how every single word comprises vowels and consonants, and that the vowel sounds come from the planetary realm, and the consonants from the zodiacal realm, so that language was originally born out of this awareness of the movements of the planets through the constellations of the zodiac. Or just to give an example, we take the ancient word of creation in Sanskrit, Aum. The Au sound is related to the sun, and the N sound to Aquarius. So actually Aum expresses sun in Aquarius. If we go back, historically we go back to what we could call the primal language, which was formed in this way from cosmic realms. And Steiner was able to behold this, and he developed that, and he saw how each sound has an underlying movement which we can bring to expression through our gestures. So the sound N, corresponding to Aquarius, has this, like a wave of sympathy. You go out with warmth and sympathy towards something. So when one likes something, you go, So he developed this new art of movement, Eurythmy, which you could say is a kind of Western form of Qigong, in the sense that some of the gestures are the same, but the difference is that in Steiner's exploration, these gestures are based in language or in music. Music also, every tone, every interval in music also has a gesture. He was able to see that and describe it. And so his work in developing this new form of movement is something that deeply interested me, because I could see here is a way it may be possible to connect with the zodiac and the planets in a living way. So at that point in time, I gave up my very good profession as a teacher of mathematics for students of computer science, and went to study Eurythmy in Dornach, Switzerland, a centre which was established by Steiner there, and I have no regrets, because my life has unfolded through taking that step in a wonderful way. And so my work has been really to develop the cosmic aspects, the cosmic dimension of Eurythmy. I use the word choreokosmos from the Greek, which translates as cosmic dance and sacred dance. And some of you will know that I developed here this book. It's called Dances of the Starry Spheres, an introduction to choreokosmos. And in this book is given some background about this particular development from Eurythmy. So basically Steiner gave the basic gestures, and in some cases forms. And those of us who are working with this is now specifically related to the four elements: fire, air, water, earth, to the 7 classical planets, after which the days of the week are named: Sunday after the sun, Monday after the moon, and so on, and 12 signs of the zodiac, and also developing then a cycle of 84 cosmic dances for the 7 classical planets in the 12 signs of the zodiac. So for any given cosmic configuration, like today, say, with the sun in Capricorn, it would be possible to do this in movement. And this is something very wonderful, a wonderful way of deepening into an experience of these subtle levels of existence which we are connected with, but which normally we don't experience. But we just consider our planet, Earth, is embedded in the solar system. We are part of a larger organism comprising the sun, the moon, the planets. So they are all having their effect. And similarly, our solar system is embedded in our local part of the galaxy, where the signs of the zodiac are defined as comprising these divisions which provide the background for the movements of the planets. So this is one of the things we're working with in Cosmos, and this has been my life's work since the year 1990, and I've travelled around in Europe, different European countries, in Australia, and different places in the United States and Canada, teaching Cosmos. And what I found is that people are very enthusiastic. They love doing it, and so this has been very rewarding to meet wonderful people in different locations around the world, and to be working together in this new form of movement, which is very much a community endeavor. So that is one dimension of this. Another is what is described in this book, Cultivating Inner Radiance in the Body of Immortality, which is what I call sacred dance, movement to prayer and meditation. And so this book appeared in the year 2012, gives a kind of summary of my work up to that point in time with sacred dance, which is a way of connecting with the great guiding beings of our evolution, our spiritual evolution. So there would be, of course, much more that would be possible to say about this, but I'm wondering if there are any questions.
Yeah, I have one question. So I don't understand why is before when you talked about the astrology that the sign is 25 degrees different now? How is that happening? How did that happen?
Well, this is through what is known in astronomy as the precession of the equinoxes. So right now the vernal equinox, and I'll restrict my focus of attention to the northern hemisphere. The vernal equinox denotes the beginning of spring, and that is usually either March the 20th or March 21st in the northern hemisphere. And the vernal point is the precise location at that time of the vernal equinox when the sun is crossing the Earth's equator as it passes from south to north. The sun then ascends higher, and at midsummer it reaches its highest position, which in the northern hemisphere is around about June 22nd. That's called the summer solstice, and then the sun begins to descend down, and in the autumn, in the fall, we have around about September 23rd the autumn equinox, which is the opposite point to the vernal point, when the sun is moving southward, coming down from above the equator to below. And then we have the lowest point is the winter solstice. And so, which is called the Tropic of Capricorn, whereas the high point at the summer solstice is called the Tropic of Cancer. And this goes back to Ptolemy, well actually before him is Greek astronomer Hipparchus already defined this movement of the sun during the cycle of the year. And so at that time, well, it's considered Ptolemy when he was writing around about 150 years after Christ. He lived in Alexandria. He was an astronomer, but he was also, as a kind of academic, interested in astrology, and so he collected everything he could find about it and wrote a book about it called the Tetrabiblos. And in that book he says that the sign of Aries begins at the vernal equinox. And that was more or less true at his time, because at that point in time that was the case. Now for the Babylonians, if we go back to say like 500 years before Christ, they also have made reference to this movement of the sun during the cycle of the year, and they said that the vernal point at that time, this is about 500 years before Christ, was at 10 degrees of Aries. Now they didn't know that it moves 1 degree every 72 years. That's why the age of 72 is actually quite an interesting age. The precession rate of precession is 1 degree every 72 years. And so if we start from the time of Ptolemy, or actually a little bit after Ptolemy, when the vernal point really was at 0 degrees of Aries, then 72 years later it had moved back to 29 degrees of Pisces, and then a further 72 years later it moved back to 28 degrees of Pisces. Because it moves backwards, so it's called precession of the equinoxes. And that means that there is a a continual shift taking place, where it's a long shifting movement. And so since the time of Ptolemy, or shortly after, that had now amounted to 25 degrees. So the vernal point is now at 5 degrees of Pisces. So this 25 degree shift from the time of Ptolemy, when it was at 0 degrees of Aries.
So I'm not an astrologer or astronomer or anything like that. So let me get this straight. You're saying that astrology is having a map and it's stationary while the heavens are moving, and every 72 years it's 1 degree movement. And so because it's so slowly moving, nobody's really paying attention, but 2,000 years later it's kind of a big deal.
Exactly, that's very well put.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, we had this conversation a few weeks ago, and you blew my mind with it, because I was always running around thinking that I was a Scorpio, and then you took me out in the middle of the night, and you showed me on the GPS that the sun is not in Scorpio, and I'm like, and my world falls apart. Like my whole paradigm of I thought I knew just a little bit of astrology here, and so I can imagine you're not that popular around the circles of astrologers. But I mean, is there anybody out there who's like, adopting this and actually taking it in and realizing this and start doing their work from this perspective?
Yes, well, interestingly, now there are an increasing number of Western astrologers who are taking up the Hindu astrology, Vedic astrology, and they're confronted with this, and they make this change.
So the Vedic astrology is correct?
Yeah.
Okay, but how could they take out one house and still be correct?
Well, in terms of the definition of the Sidereal zodiac, not so that house refers to something else. It refers to what is known as a lunar mansion or nakshatra, and it's related to the movement of the moon, because the moon moves approximately 12 degrees a day, between 12 and 15 degrees a day, and that is how the nakshatra is defined, so that the moon is in a new nakshatra each day, or we should say each night, because of course this is something that in the Vedic times they were observing, and they were very much attuned to this force of the moon, and so they were able to describe what the moon was doing when it was in a certain part of the starry heavens. So that is the ancient Hindu. For the Egyptians it was more to do with the sun, where the sun was. But for the Babylonians it was to do with the actual starry heavens themselves, and this 12-fold division. So there is, again, this actually relates to different levels within the human being.
So basically the conclusion is that the Vedic astrology, they know where the stars are. They actually know where they are. And the Western astrology is 25 degrees off, basically. Okay, that's very interesting. So the other question I'm having is, when the Western astrology starts describing you, like they give you an astrology reading, because I had many readings, it sounds so accurate what they say. How do you explain that?
Well, there have been various studies made of this, and I'm just going to describe one such study. This was done by a French mathematician, statistician and psychologist, Michel Gauquelin, who I met, but he's no longer alive, and he applied statistical research to astrology. Very interesting work. And he set it up for a gathering. People came, and there were about 20 people. There were about 20 astrologers who were offering readings. And so Michel Gauquelin selected 20 people, or 20 people volunteered to have their horoscope read. And Michel Gauquelin had the horoscope quickly computed. And then each person went to one of these 20 astrologers, and then afterwards they say, "Oh, that was incredible, just so amazing." The things they said were so accurate, so extraordinary. And then Michel Gauquelin revealed that he had just taken the 20 horoscopes and shuffled them around and dealt them out to the 20 astrologers. And so, you see, this is the thing: if somebody is predisposed to believe something beforehand, then what they are told, they will believe.
Yeah.
You see? Now, that's kind of extreme case, but in a horoscope, there is also, we can just consider simply the planets and the relationships between the planets. And that remains the same regardless of the zodiacal
position.
background.
Yeah. Okay.
And so there is a whole area of the horoscope that is the same for tropical and sidereal. You can still have very accurate observations being made by tropical astrologers. But I would say it's a bit like this, if you grow up in the Western world, let's say, or you could go back to the time of Soviet communism, you grew up in East Germany or somewhere like that, then there are still wonderful people there in East Germany, but I would say that they'd be even better off without having this dogma imposed upon them. And that's what I would say, that there are many wonderful tropical astrologers, but they'd be even better astrologers if they were to change to sidereal astrology.
Yeah.
And this is what I've seen also over and over again.
Okay. Once upon a time, a man, he said, a half-truth is a full lie. So if you only have half the picture, and you need to fill in the blanks yourself after that, it can turn into a complete different story.
Exactly.
And also, I saw once on television, and now I remember this, before I forgot about it, but there was this magician called Darren Brown. He put a ton of people in a room, and he gave them all an astrology reading, and they were crying and having strong reactions. And apparently there's something called cold reading, where, like, in a very NLP psychology way, you can actually speak like it sounds like you're very precise, but you're not. You're actually just generalizing. So you can actually catch people with that. And so he printed out the same reading for everybody. And they were feeling very, very deeply touched, many of them.
Yeah.
So after that, I didn't take astrology too serious anymore.
Yeah. Well, maybe just to round up this, so, when I first began to look at astrology, I was looking at tropical astrology, because that's basically, practically the only kind of astrology in the Western world. And you have to understand this from a historical perspective. I won't go into that right now, but if you have that, you can understand what happened. And so the development of astrology was associated with, you could say, a belief system that was promoted also through the popular press.
But then it's not science anymore.
It's no longer science. No, and so that is my standpoint. It is not science. It is superstition. Actually, it's a belief system.
Yeah.
People are believing in something which isn't actually real.
Mm.
And so I found ways to scientifically explore this and to determine that the sidereal horoscope is the authentic horoscope. But that, took many years of research, and that is rather complicated to go into. But I've written and published all of that research in 2 volumes called Hermetic Astrology, Hermetic Astrology Volume 1, Hermetic Astrology Volume 2. And many people have found then that these books have really helped them to come to a truer understanding of the relationship of the human being to the heavens.
Okay. And so today is your cosmic birthday.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 19th of January, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
2019.
2019. Yes.
Yeah. So what is your real astrology sign?
Well, it is, when people ask about the signs, they mean where is the sun, and you can see, just take any app and look, where is the sun? And right now it's approaching the horns of the goat. It is in Capricorn, in that first part of Capricorn.
First part of Capricorn. And according to Western astrology, what would you be?
Well, I would also be Capricorn, but that they would say it's at the near the end of Capricorn.
Yeah, okay. So big difference. Okay, well, thank you for the talk and happy birthday.
Thank you very much, Josh, and thank you everybody for being here.